So let's just come into the room together for a little bit. Let's just take a deep breath in, and as we take that deep breath in, just let go of your day a bit, the one that you have, the one that's gone. And let's just be in the room together as we exhale and set our intention for tonight, to be together and to be community. So just one deep breath in and out. Thank you. So my name is Rekha Prasad, and I work at the Office of Global Spiritual Life here at NYU with Gal Shai, who's our amazing and generous director over here, Ariel Ennis and Jerianne Perez, all of whom, with a number of students, have made this night so many other wonderful events here possible. We are a community of vibrant, authentic students, faculty, staff, etc., who come together to have conversations on religion and spirituality in higher education. Our mission is to offer environments and tools for transformative multi-faith and spiritual encounters at NYU and beyond. The Mindfulness Project is housed here and offers free weekly yoga and meditation classes throughout the year to the NYU community, and events that are open, such as this one, to the larger public. Please like us on Facebook, not right now. And check out our website, again, not right now, to get more information about us. I would like to thank the Center for Multicultural Education and Programs, who is co-sponsoring this event for Dr. Martin Luther King Week, here happening right now at NYU. Monroe Francis, Salima Jumarali, and their stellar team work tirelessly to enhance the NYU experience by fostering a more inclusive, aware, and socially just community. I thank them very much for their much needed work. I would like to thank Tricycle for also sponsoring tonight. They have generously sent over a buttload of magazines, as you might have seen when you came in, so thank you for their generosity. Please take one on your way out if you haven't grabbed one on your way in. They are the Buddhist Review and have a lot of wonderful articles, some of whom have featured our panelists tonight. Lastly, I'd like to thank the Lens Foundation for their generous support for tonight's event through their Women in Buddhism grant. They sponsor numerous social justice initiatives as well as many teachers and Buddhist organizations in the country. I thank them. There are still Women in Buddhism grants available for the year of 2015, so please be sure to go onto the Lens Foundation website for more information. Mother Nature has brought us an opportunity to sit with what is by bringing on some snow yesterday, which has sadly led to the absence of two of our panelists, Liz Lewinson and Raymond Hilda Gutierrez Sensei, who is snowed in the hill country of western Massachusetts. They both send their profound regrets, and I am extremely grateful for Sebene Selassie and honoring us tonight with her presence. So I want to take a moment to acknowledge those who may not be represented in the room today and say that all voices are needed and wanted. As an office, we will continually work toward building programming and events that create and speak to a diverse and inclusive Sangha work community. I promise I'm almost done. Lastly, let us take a moment to honor Dr. King, who, along with many others, is the reason we can all be here together and engage in the conversation tonight. Many thanks to those who came before us and our elders who have paved the way. We honor their lives by continuing the work and the conversation. Tonight's format is a little open. We'll see what arises. Our panelists are going to be speaking with you, meditating with you, practicing a little yoga with you, and then opening up the conversation amongst each other and with all of you for a Q&A at the end. So let's begin. I'm going to ask that Sebene come up and bring us together. Good evening, everyone.
It's a surprise to me to be here as well, so I haven't prepared anything this evening, and I'm really an honor to be on this panel with my friends, esteemed colleagues, and to share with you. And we want to start this evening. Gina's going to lead us in a meditation, but something we do at New York Insight, we start all of our events with an invitation to connect. So often as practitioners, particularly Buddhist practitioners, we really cherish the silence, and we don't often have the opportunity to really practice Sangha. So before we go into the silence, I'd like you all to take a few minutes to just say hello to your neighbors if you don't know them, or if you know them, and also maybe the people behind you, meet someone new, and take a few minutes to do that, and then I'll ring the bell. Thank you, Stephanie. I hope you all made a new friend tonight. So, I'm going to just introduce Gina. So, Gina Sharp is the co-founder and guiding teacher for New York Insight Meditation Center. After retiring from the practice of law, Gina Sharp co-founded New York Insight Meditation Center. She currently serves as the guiding teacher, which I just said. Trained as a retreat teacher in a joint teacher training program of Spirit Rock Meditation Center and Insight Meditation Societies. She teaches at various venues around the United States, including Spirit Rock Insight Meditation Society, Balacitos Mountain Refuge, Mid-America Dharma, etc. She has been teaching the Dharma since 1995. She has served on the board of directors of several non-for-profits and for-profit organizations. A critical voice in bringing people of color to Buddhist practice in the West, Gina has pioneered affinity-based sanghas across the nation and increased the number of people of color in teacher training programs and leadership positions. Thank you, Gina.
Good evening. I love it that you answered. That's so great. So, before we get into our conversation, we'd like to sit together. And I'd just like to know, is there anyone here, is there someone here who has never had meditation instructions? Please feel free. Oh, great, thank you. Anyone else? Isn't it one? Oh, hi. Okay, come on, you can do it. Okay. Wow, that's impressive. That really is impressive. So we get the opportunity, those of us who have practiced before and had instructions before, to listen to the instructions again, since we have colleagues who need instructions. So please feel free to ignore my instructions if you have a particular practice that you want to do, and just hear it as sound. Okay. So let's pay attention first to how we're sitting in our seats. And allow your posture to float up so that the spine is erect without being tight or tense or contracted, but it's dignified. And one of the ways of keeping that dignity in a chair is putting both feet on the floor in front of you. And another way is not leaning the middle of the spine into the back of the chair, but allowing it to float. It's like being a king or a queen in your seat. And what is part of that is to be relaxed and at ease while maintaining that dignity. So that we're immediately establishing a kind of balanced and poised posture. it's helpful to put your hands in a place that they won't have to fidget. So if you put them palms down on your knees, or palms up one on top of the other in your lap. And just check to see if there's any tightness or tension that's held in the shoulders, in the neck, or in the facial muscles. And if you find some tension there, to the extent that it's possible, release. It would be helpful to just take a deep breath. And on the out breath, imagine that there are all of the cares and the hopes and the difficulties of the day are being released. And as you're breathing in ease and presence. A fine attention to what is here now in the whole organism, in the mind, in the heart, and in the body. Letting the attention come to rest on this body breathing. Nothing complicated or no effort needed beyond the resolve to be present for what is true right now. You can use the breath as a way of being here. Just letting the attention float onto the breath. As it's there, refine it into knowing the in-breath, knowing the out-breath from beginning to end, and knowing the pause in between. We'll allow for the next few moments, I'll be silent so that you can move more and more deeply into knowing this movement of breath in the body. I'll join 7 in the pleasure of being here with you. I'm beginning to understand why the Dalai Lama wears those. I'm a graduate of NYU. I went to law school here. Spent 3 years in that building down the road. So I feel very much at home being with you. I do notice that for this event of women in Buddhism, that we have one or two of the other gender, one of the other genders with us. And I really want to particularly welcome the gentlemen in the room. So thank you for coming. particularly interesting time to talk about being a woman in the Buddhist community, and to talk about activism and diversity and multiculturalism, and particularly around this Martin Luther King Day holiday, although I know it's a little bit past that. It's really hard to know where to even begin to talk about it, because there's so much happening in our culture. And in some ways it's becoming, the issue du jour. It's becoming very fashionable to talk about the suffering of racism and homophobia and misogyny, and all of the ways in which we divide ourselves. So I want to actually start a quote that's actually become quite ubiquitous lately from Dr. King, just to put us in some context in Buddhist context, because I think that we may tend to talk about it more as a political problem, but actually I see it as a spiritual koan, how we treat each other and how we relate to each other. So if you give me a moment, let me just find it. This is from a Christmas sermon on peace that he gave in 1967. He said, it really boils down to this, that all life is interrelated. We are all caught in an inescapable network of mutuality, tied into a single garment of destiny. Whatever affects one directly, affects all indirectly. We are made to live together because of the interrelated structure of reality. Did you ever stop to think that you can't leave for your job in the morning without being dependent on most of the world? You get up in the morning and go to the bathroom and reach over for the sponge, and that's handed to you by a Pacific Islander. You reach for a bar of soap, and that's given to you at the hands of a Frenchman. And then you go into the kitchen to drink your coffee for the morning, and that's poured into your cup by a South American. And maybe you want tea. That's poured into your cup by a Chinese. Or maybe you're desirous of having cocoa for breakfast, and that's poured into your cup by a West African. And then you reach for your toast, and that's given to you at the hands of an English-speaking farmer, not to mention the baker. And before you finish eating breakfast in the morning, you've depended on more than half the world. This is the way our universe is structured. This is its interrelated quality. We aren't going to have peace on earth until we recognize this basic fact of the interrelated structure of all reality. Many of the accounts of Dr. King's trip to India speak of how profoundly he was affected by Gandhi and his his doctrine of nonviolence, and the roots, the Pan-Asian roots of that philosophy. And of course, as Buddhists, we are constantly reflecting on the fact that this thing that we call self, this thing that we call me, Gina, Sebene, Angel, Looker, that it's fluid, it's insubstantial, it's a drop of dew, a star at dawn, a flickering lamp, a dream. And that actually, this idea that each of us is a bag of skin, totally independent and not at all connected, is becoming more and more emergent and urgent for us to see as a falsity. All of the technology that's being developed is technology that keeps us apart. We talk about being connected by iPhone and iPad and Facebook and Twitter and blah, blah, blah. But actually, are we actually feeling the reality of what it means for each human being to have the dignity of being unique and individual, and at the same time completely connected and necessary to our human community? The work that we do to see that that becomes more and more a reality is, as we all know, becoming more and more urgent as we see all of the ways that we've been separating ourselves. By class, by race, or we won't even talk about race, and the fact that it's not real. It's not real. It's a totally constructed concept. And even the idea of gender, we're beginning to really understand the fluidity of that too. So as Buddhist thinkers, we're really challenged to understand deeply what it means to be interconnected, to understand deeply that we are completely interdependent, that without that understanding, we are in total peril. And that's not just a kind of political nicety, but a really meaningful understanding of what it means to be in community. And so the teachings of the Buddha, where he invited us, no, he did more than invite. He actually told us that our happiness is a deep happiness that is not dependent on how much sensual pleasure we could get, or how much we could rack up in terms of earnings or material goods, but that it's freedom of the heart that really gives us any possibility of lasting happiness. And that freedom of the heart is dependent upon understanding deeply the vulnerability and the uncertainty of life, and how our response to that is what creates suffering or freedom from suffering. So that our meetings, when we come together to really consider these issues of the suffering of a particular group, is not really about the suffering of a particular group, but the particular form that suffering is taking. And that suffering is a universal and completely human condition that needs to be deeply understood. And so my teaching these days is really more about understanding suffering than it is about freedom from suffering. And it doesn't mean that I don't believe in freedom from suffering, but that the foundation of that freedom is built around the understanding of suffering, the understanding of this nature of life that is uncertain and vulnerable. And that belongs to every single one of us. None of us is excluded, rich or poor, whatever race, in quotes, gender, in quotes, tall, thin, doesn't matter. We are all, that is the one thing that we can all say, yes, I've experienced that. I understand that. And so we're asked to really, to really understand deeply, not superficially. And that understanding is dependent on our knowing our blind spots, where we're falling short of seeing, where our biases are, that we don't even have, the 10% of the understanding of the biases that we've been conditioned to have in our culture. So our job as Buddhist practitioners or students, or even if you're just mildly interested, is to first understand the nature of this life, the nature of being in this human body, and what the responsibilities are that we take on when we take on this body. And what it means if we really feel that yearning to be free, what it entails, how we can even begin to move towards freedom in our hearts, a freedom that is not dependent on conditions, but is completely independent of conditions, and is dependent only on our deep wisdom and integrity. So I love, and I so appreciate Reka inviting me to speak. I love what she entitled, or she and her colleagues entitled, Sit Down and Stand Up. Right? That first we start by sitting, and it was beautiful to be in the silent room with you, to sit down first, and to really see our own minds, and to investigate our own hearts, and what is this body? And then to stand up, to be in community, to be together, to really feel the humanness of each of us, and that is something that we all have in common, so that we understand the joys, the sorrows, and everything in between. So it's my pleasure to be with Sebene and Angel and Booker, all amazing women that I've known now for a little while, and to actually be in conversation about all of this. So I'll pass this on to Angel.
Thanks. Oh, very good.
Rika's going to introduce you. So thank you all for being here and for being in conversation with us, and I hope that you will really participate when we come to conversation with you. Thank you.
Reverend Angel Kyoto William Sensei is the founder and senior fellow of Transformative Change. Called the most vocal and most intriguing African-American Buddhist in America by Library Journal, Reverend Angel is an author, maverick, spiritual teacher, master trainer, and founder of the Center for Transformative Change. She has been bridging the worlds of personal transformation and justice since the publishing of her critically acclaimed book, Being Black, Zen and the Art of Living with Fearlessness and Grace. Her book was hailed as an act of love by Pulitzer Prize winner Alice Walker and a classic by Buddhist teacher Jack Kornfield. Ordained as a Zen priest, she recently became the second Black woman recognized as a teacher in her lineage.
You know, you have those bios out there. It's like a little jack-in-the-box experience. Like, which one did I have? And that one is at least relatively recent, so that's great. And I have to like, we were determined to break the panel format. The drink is holding us down. We were totally enjoying ourselves in the back room together. And just before we came, we reflected on like if it were, we were, I want to say conventionally male-bodied and masculine oriented, but would this be the way that we were conversing? Because we were like, no, you do it, you go. Why don't we do it together? We should just have a conversation. Taking tea. It was sort of like, oh, we have to go out there. I'm really pleased to be here and didn't prepare anything as usual. So I'll just steal from the things that Gina has said and pretend that I know what I'm talking about. So I want to pick up where she, one of the threads, at least one of the threads that Gina introduced into this fabric that we're building here together, and that was to name that life. The nature of life is that it is vulnerable and uncertain. It is characterized by uncertainty and vulnerability. What caught my attention is, and it is our response to that, that determines whether or not our experience is one of suffering or awakening. It's our responsibility. It is how we ultimately choose to respond to what is. So we can't get away from that first part. The first part is, it just is so. Uncertainty and vulnerability. And every time she repeated the word vulnerability, I could just feel that if you let yourself really hear that, all of your own vulnerability is just for a moment touched upon. And it is in that space of allowing ourselves to feel that vulnerability, to acknowledge fully how uncertain it all is. And if we let go of the grasping at knowing and trying to make it right, trying to make it work, trying to make it look better, trying to make it look, prettier, make it have more money, have a bigger car, a bigger house, better looking boyfriend or girlfriend or other thing or whatever it is we're up to these days, right? We're just working ourselves into a constant frenzy of trying to have it different than what it is. We're trying to be safe, and we're trying to be sure. And it's neither one of those things. And it's not a terrible thing, it's a profound responsibility to sit in the seat that you are sitting in and take up that responsibility of deeply knowing, deeply coming to understand the truth of that. I like to say that the first noble truth is practiced. It's actually something that we practice. It's not knowing in our head, because we have language challenges. And so when, I believe, when Gina says understanding, the way that you come to truly understand something is that you practice it. And what we tend to do is we practice avoiding it. Which is why we do the bypass and we go, yeah, third noble truth, there's a possibility of freedom. First? Yeah. What was that first thing? But if we don't take up the responsibility, the charge of understanding it, then really what use are we? What use are we to our friends, to our family, to our community? Because, as Gina was saying in the back room, we have a shaky foundation. Those of us that feel vigorous about changing the world, we want to see political change, we want to see social change, we want to see transformation, we want to see revolution, we want to see radical things happen. And we're trying to build it without really touching deeply the truth of suffering, the nature of life, really practicing it. We feel so convinced that we are under the boot of this or that cause or condition that we can bypass that. Because surely it's clear that we're suffering. We all are. And that's what is necessary for us to truly understand in order for us to even begin to see what freedom is possible. Because if we don't practice deeply this first noble truth, then what we do is we recreate those causes and conditions. We have no choice but to do that, because it's blind to us. And so we just keep casting the same net and we catch the same fish. We seek to have freedom, but we do it in ways that negate the humanity of others. What freedom could come from that? We want society to be transformed, but we imagine that there's an us and a them. What freedom could come from that? We want racism and misogyny, homophobia put aside, but we want to construct folks solely and have them cast as monolithic, perhaps white male, conservative, something on Fox 5. And imagine perhaps that there isn't a human being that is uncertain and vulnerable. And that his lack of understanding the nature of life is the root of perpetuating suffering. And if we're not willing to allow that into our own hearts, as we seek opportunities for truly changing things, we don't allow that to be present for us, what freedom could come from that? I think I'm really happy to see many people here that I have been in the room with before, and I know people are really used to my strong voice about changing things. And I want to make it clear that for me, it's entirely founded upon my fundamental connection and, as best I can do, understanding this uncertainty and vulnerability. That I keep them with me at all times. And that when I get to thinking, that there's a someone out there that's causing something that is hindering my freedom, then I go back to my uncertainty and vulnerability. Because that's actually all that is creating the suffering. So that the freedom that we seek does truly live within us. And of course that's a paradox, because we think, well, naturally there are all these things out there we can point to causes and conditions. Pick up a newspaper, turn on the television, pick the cell phone. Causes and conditions abound. In terms of situations that are keeping us from our freedom. How could it possibly be that discovering the freedom of our own hearts, that practicing into the freedom of our own hearts and having an open heart is the key, is the doorway to a freedom in our relative reality. This is where the faith that one could say exists in the Buddhist tradition exists. That you actually have to allow for that space of not knowing and give yourself over to practice. Because the answer to that, how is that possible, cannot come from anything other but your own experience. I could sit here all day and say, that's what's true. But only when you touch it yourself do you know it yourself. And you don't have to know it in some huge way where it's all out there in society. It's like, oh, I've done this practice and now look, everything is all better. Right? It comes in these moments of insight. Of when you're sitting here in a room together and you knew that you were in a room with 200 people and then somehow all of that otherness dropped away. And there was just this. Not you and me and her and her and him and her and her. Rather, there was just this. There was just this reality that was perfect as it is. We didn't need anything. We didn't require anything. We didn't have to fix it. And there wasn't race, there wasn't color, there wasn't gender. there weren't particular body types or intelligences that were lesser than any others. It was just this. And the very core of the possibility of freedom lies in the recognition of that moment. And being so enamored with how beautiful it is, how full it is, how complete it is, that you called back to it again and again. That one taste of freedom is enough to beckon you back again and again to grow and expand it until it's untethered, completely untethered from causes and conditions. That doesn't mean that the relative reality doesn't continue on in many ways as it is. But it means that you are free within it. And from there, you have the possibility of seeing a freedom that is outside. And only from there. And only from there. I think that bears emphasis. Only from there. Because everything that we imagine from within the construct of limitation, of incarceration, of the tyranny of the mind, and all of the social constructs that come with it. Everything that is imagined from within there will be a vision of that same place. It may seem like a slightly better vision. It may seem like something more enticing. But it's still a permutation of the limitation. It's still a permutation of being closed. It's still a permutation of holding on to the notion of a separate self that is not completely dependent upon everyone else's existence. So what we have to do here today and every day is to see if we can dig further into our own commitment to discover our own freedom and allow that to be a path to the freedom, the justice that we seek someplace else. It is my pleasure to pass this on to Reika.
So, Sebene Selassie is a Dharma teacher and certified integral coach interested in building transformative connections between creativity, community, and spirituality. She was born in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia, and raised in Washington, D.C. For over 20 years, she has worked with children, youth, and families nationally and internationally for small and large non-profits. Her work has taken her everywhere, from the Tenderloin in San Francisco to refugee camps in Guinea, West Africa. She is particularly committed to the power of arts-based learning and has planned, coordinated, and taught a variety of creative programs, including intergenerational photography, digital storytelling, and youth media. She has been studying Buddhism since her early 20s and is the executive director of New York Insight Meditation Center. Sebene is a 2-time breast cancer survivor. Please welcome.
Thank you. I am so honored to follow these 2 brilliant ladies. I'm also a little horrified by that. But really moved by what you're both touching touching on in terms of this deep practice, this deep understanding that's necessary for our liberation. And for me, I've been thinking a lot lately and writing some about the feminine in Dharma. And part of my inspiration of that exploration is the bell hooks quote that gender has no patriarchy has no gender. So for me, it is very important to talk about women in Buddhism, but it's almost more important for me to talk about the feminine in Buddhism. Because the lack of the feminine energy in our practice, in the constructs that we're all within, because this is a construct, as profound as the Dharma is, we only practice it in forms that have been constructed. And for me, the feminine energy has been suppressed, lost, underappreciated. And it's not that we want to get rid of that masculine energy, but it's so much of what has been the cause of our suffering, that charge of moving through, plowing through to the third noble truth, the doing of our work, of our activism, of our lives, that endless busyness, the just insane amounts of distraction and really lostness. And I've been really struck by listening as a metaphor, and heard at some point, I think on a retreat, that hearing is the first sense that is developed in the womb, and it's the last sense to go even after our breath stops. And just the profundity of that listening is there from the very beginning until we're gone. And that beautiful metaphor of Kuan Yin, the goddess of compassion, whose original incarnation actually of Avalokiteshvara is transgendered. So it's really this beautiful unification of the feminine and masculine. She is said to hear all of the cries and sounds of the world, all the joys and sorrows of all the beings, here and beyond. And to me, lately, this is what my practice has been about, is that real deep listening. And that requires the space and the pause that Gina and Angel are talking about. That ability to really rest in the moment without projecting our agendas or ideas or evaluations of a situation, but to really take time to go deep within and listen to ourselves. And to me, I've been experiencing it as a really deep longing. That when I can really become quiet and still, that I sense this deep longing, desire for connection and belonging. And it's there, that possibility, if I can listen deep enough. It's a relational quality, because when we can do it for ourselves, we can start to recognize, as Angel's saying, that it's something that is in all of us. That this desire for connection, for joy, for freedom, it exists in that person in front of me who seems to be in my way in some form or another, either ideologically or physically. The streets of New York is usually physically. To me, this all also comes back to Sangha, community. That this feminine quality is inherently relational, and that the isolated way that the construct or form of practice is taken here in the West. I don't want to make assumptions, but we all have some relationship to convert or Western Buddhism here. And there could be this real individualistic quality to it, this separation, what I call the back of the head sangha. You go to a dharma center, you sit down, you stare at the back of someone's head for a couple of hours. A few people, brave people ask questions, and everyone leaves. And that we study and practice primarily on our own in silence. Where is the liberatory power in listening to each other? And how do we access that? I always find it interesting and liberating to know that the 5 hindrances, they all have different antidotes. Restlessness has a different antidote than sleepiness, but all of them share the antidote of kalyana mitta, of spiritual friendship. And the 7 factors of awakening, they all have different things that support them, and cultivate them. But they all share kalyana mitta, spiritual friendship, as something that supports and awakens the factors of awakening. And I'm sure many of you have heard the story of Ananda when he asked the Buddha, is spiritual friendship half of the holy life? And the Buddha said, no, spiritual friendship is the whole of holy life. And so can we really take that in? Can Sangha be a practice? Not just something that, I call something the stepsister refuge. Buddha and Dharma, the serious refuge. Sangha puts out the chairs and cleans up at the end of the night. But what does it really mean to practice Sangha? This deep listening. Listening first to ourselves to really connect to that suffering, that vulnerability that you talked about so beautifully, both of you. And then to be able to recognize, see it, relate to it in the others. And for me, it's really important to have some close Sangha, and then to begin to practice outward from there. And can we have a heart as wide as the world, as Shen Songtong says? Can we make the whole world our Sangha? And can we engage in our work from that place of really deep listening? So let me put that question and hand it off to
Leslie Hooker, who is getting hooked up right now, is the founder of Urban Sangha Project. Hooker is a facilitator, trainer, public speaker, consultant, and a yoga teacher. As a senior teacher and director of teacher trainings for the Lineage Project, she has brought the practices of yoga and meditation to incarcerated and court-involved youth since 2008. Hooker facilitated a fusion of mindfulness and cognitive-based therapy intervention on Rikers Island from 2009 to 2011 through New York University, and has taught with the Prison Yoga Project in San Quentin Prison in Northern California. Co-founding the Yoga Service Council in 2010, Hooker has continued to find ways to support the sustainability of those on the front lines and in direct service through co-creating the Meditation Working Group of Occupy Wall Street, monthly Yoga for Changemakers workshops, annual retreats, and national diversity trainings for yoga teachers created by Third Root Education Exchange. In 2013, Hooker completed her 500 hours in mindful yoga and meditation training through Spirit Rock and is honored to be invited as faculty for the 2014-15 training. Hooker brought mindful yoga and meditation to the 2012 Democratic National Convention through the Yoga Votes campaign, convened by Off the Mat Into the World, is a regular presenter at mindfulness conferences around the country. She is truly committed to collaborations that support bridging the gap between yoga, mindfulness, and grassroots activism. After the longest application of her life, she will begin 2-year community Dharma leaders training through Spirit Rock this spring. Welcome, Booker.
Gina just apologized for the longest application of my life. You didn't apologize for that. nothing more intimidating than speaking after these three, in case you were wondering. Speaking will be very, very wonderful this evening. Oh, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about my story, kind of how I got here. And I moved to New York City at the end of the 90s to work in the fashion industry, which I did for a while. And when it was time for me to segue out, I just want to first of all acknowledge my beautiful friends and teachers and colleagues. This is such an honor to be sitting here with you all. So, when it was time for me to segue out of the fashion industry, I ended up working at a New York Open Center. That's where I met my dear friend and mentor, Stan Greer, who brought me to a deeper understanding of yoga and into insight meditation. Did me my first retreat where Gina was teaching, Larry Yang and Bhante Buddha, and about 6 months later, I found myself on an airplane flying to Uganda to sit in the jungle with Bhante to study with him. Bhante is a Ugandan monk. And during this personal retreat, it's one of those beautiful things where you're there, you're waking up to the sun, you're watching the sunrise over Lake Victoria, going to practice every day. And towards the end of my trip, I started to have that sort of pre-post-retreat thing that we always do, like, I'm going to lose all this, I'm going to forget how to meditate, I'm never going to have this experience again. You know what I'm talking about? Right? That deep fear of like, I have to grasp onto this, or I'm going to lose it forever. And also, I was flying back to New York in the dead of winter without a job. I quit my job to go to Uganda. I forgot to mention that part. And so I went to Bhante for career advice. And I don't highly recommend going to monastics for career advice, but in this case it worked. And Bhante said to me, your life has to be your practice, and your practice has to be your work. There can be no separation. And at the time I thought, that is the worst advice I've ever received in my life. I was fully committed to going back to New York and, being a 30-something-year-old woman. I wanted to date, meeting out with my friends. I didn't understand how I could bring this beautiful practice that I cultivated with Bhante back into my real life. I didn't know how to make that work. So soon after my trip, I picked up Sharon Salzberg's Loving Kindness. I'm sure most of us have read that book. And towards the beginning of the book, she has a really beautiful thought around fragmentation. And what she says is that true love is really moving away from fragmentation. She says that true love is when you no longer push away that which is not pleasant. It's not about pushing those parts away that we or others do not like or do not want in the room. It's really about embracing all of who we are, that whole complete being. And up until that stage, I think I was really living more of a fragmented life. I was not standing up for injustices while at work. I was negating the feelings of isolation and being the only person of color in the room when I was teaching yoga. And I was suppressing my feminine nature while I was sitting in meditation. And I realized that I didn't really have the luxury of laying those things aside. These are things I could not push away, could not hide from. That was how I showed up in the world to everyone. And so being a woman, being black, being one who stands up for injustices, all of these were pieces of who I was, and to really bring all of those together to be a whole person. So I began to understand Bhante's words at that time, that being able to alleviate my own suffering, that first noble truth, that really acknowledging our suffering, being able to alleviate that suffering, and to be fully present, authentic in my life, had to be through my practice. There could be no separation between my practice and my life. It had to be fully and totally integrated. I couldn't choose to be this or that. I had to be this and that, and that. So in September of 2011, is the middle of the mindful yoga meditation training, and was very surprised to come home to an occupation in New York City. We had been in complete and total silence for 10 days, had absolutely no idea what was going on, and by the time we hit the airport, everyone's like, did you hear New York is being occupied? I'm like, occupied by who? Who took New York? And so yeah, so that's what we came back to. It was really intense. And I knew that was something that I not just wanted to, but I needed to be involved with. I knew that I really needed to step up into this movement. In my 20s, I was really involved with activism. I was one of those like angry, like there's pumping, kicking cups kind of activist, you know what I'm saying? And that didn't really work for me because I was angry. I didn't understand at that time that your anger actually has to kind of pass through the heart and transform into compassionate and loving action. I didn't know that because I didn't have a practice before. So this time around, I really sat with and contemplated how I wanted to show up in this movement. And so a bunch of us gathered together at Sangha sit in Zuccotti Park. I'm sure many of you were there. It was on the 30th day anniversary of Zuccotti Park. About 80 people showed up to sit. And after that, I was like, we have to do this every single day in the park. And so a smaller group of us started to organize the meditation working with Occupy Wall Street, which meant that we went into the park every day to practice metta. So we spent an hour there with metta, and people would sit around and just talk, really cultivating Sangha. And I don't think that was really happening in that way yet during the movement. So when people really started to see how we would come together and talk and bear witness and listen to people's suffering, other working groups started to invite us in to show them how to bring these few minutes of grounding into their meetings. We were invited to the beginning of all the General Assembly and Spokes Council meetings to start with a grounding before they went into the meetings. After the eviction of the park, there were a lot of requests to keep these conversations going, keep this community, this Sangha going. And also after sleeping on the concrete for 5 weeks, people's bodies were starting to ache a lot. And they started to ask me if I also taught yoga. And so from there I started an affinity group, the Urban Sangha Project, to support the sustainability of the occupiers. The occupation only lasted for 5 weeks, but these gatherings of coming together, bearing witness, sharing practice lasted for 6 months after the eviction. And almost 3.5 years later, we continue to do these monthly workshops, and we open them up to social workers, legal aid workers, people working in medical professions and mental health professions, educators, those who are really in direct service and on the front lines, who need that Sangha, that community, that support system that leans in and listens and bears witness to their suffering. It's been a really supportive system for them. And I find that what's happening with activism right now, there is more Sangha showing up, more that feminine energy of a self-care is really stepping in. People are understanding that you have to take care of yourselves, before you take care of others. You really have to be strong and focused and steady and solid in your own body before you can move out there. I want to end with one of my favorite quotes by Audre Lorde, which Haley is waiting for that, right? She says that caring for myself is not self-indulgent. It is self-preservation. And that is an act of political warfare. So I would love to spend a few minutes sharing yoga practice with you. That sound good? So everyone come to the edge of your seat. Bringing your feet, your ankles, your knees, and your hips in line with each other. Resting the palms of your hands down to your lap. Take a moment just to rest your eyes. And let's begin to generate Ujjayi breath, which is the sound of the ocean. I love that Sebene brought up that one of the first senses that's developed in the womb is the sound. And the first sound that we hear is the sound of the ocean. So you make this by breathing in, slightly constricting the throat, and breathing out. Think about when you're inside of a warm room and it's cold outside, you fog up that window, so it's that that same constriction of the throat but keeping the lips together. So breathing in, breathing out. The next time you breathe in, dropping your left ear to your left shoulder. When you're ready to breathe out, begin to roll the chin across the heart until your right ear rests on top of your right shoulder, taking a breath in. And breathing out, rolling the chin across the heart. Breathing in. So using that breath out to move the neck, and the breath then kind of resets the body as you rest the ear on top of the shoulder. Noticing if there's any tension or tightness, any place that you want to hang out for just a moment. Give a little bit of extra attention or love to it. And when the left ear comes back around on top of the left shoulder, just hang it out there. So I'm mirroring you, so they're doing their own thing over here. Okay. So bringing the left hand over top of your head, just give a little bit of traction to the neck there. Taking a breath in. And as you breathe out, bringing the right fingertips to the shoulder, just slightly pulling that shoulder away, giving a little bit of length to your neck. And breathing in deeply. Breathing out. Taking a few more breaths here. And as you breathe in, releasing the hand. And then bringing the hands back into the lap. And just feeling that pause. Noticing that feeling time of the body right now. And then begin to drop the left ear on top of the left shoulder. Sorry, right ear on top of the right shoulder. Everybody's like, oh, okay. So bringing this kind of right hand on top of the head. And then bringing those fingertips to just gently pull that shoulder away. Allowing the sternum to lift up, heart lifts. And breathing in deeply. And breathing out. Taking that breath in, Ujjayi breath. And then releasing the hands back down into the lap. Bringing the hands to the front of your knees. And as you breathe in, see if you can roll your heart across your thighs, lifting it up. And as you breathe out, tucking the chin back towards your heart, rounding the spine as you bring the chin back towards your heart. So again, breathing in, kind of a modified cat-cow here, so lifting up. And as you breathe out, tucking the chin back in. Let's do that 2 more times. Really allowing the breath to move first, allowing the body to follow. As you breathe in, coming back up to neutral. So extending the left arm out in front of you. Taking the right hand, just kind of rotate the shoulder. Bring in the fingertips back towards your shoulder. And then bring in the right hand to lift the shoulder up. So releasing the left hand so it kind of floats behind your neck there. And then beginning to bend the body over. So you're bringing the body over to the window side of the room. So breathing in deeply here. And breathing out. And checking out where your feet are. Making sure that they're still grounded, still connecting to the earth. Making sure you're not popping out of your seat, but you're really keeping both of your sits bones grounded. Coming back to that breath again. And your next in breath, releasing, bringing the hands back to the lap. And then extending your other arm out. Again, rotating that shoulder open. Bringing the fingertips back towards your shoulder. I guess I remember left, right. It's tomato, right? And then bringing the shoulder up. Again, just releasing that hand that's hanging out behind your back there. So taking a breath in. And as you breathe out, leaning over towards the wall side of the room. So checking the body with the shoulders, with the ribs, the lungs that are breathing deeply in. Noticing if you're jutting your ribcage down, see if you can pull that back in. Taking one more breath in. And as you exhale, releasing your hands back down. Let's stand up for a moment. This is sort of a modified sun salutation. As we breathe in, just bring the arms straight up over your head, taking a big breath in, gazing up towards your belly. As you exhale, bring the hands through your heart center, bending the knees and bringing your hands to your knees, dropping the crown of your head down towards the ground. Breathing in, lengthening out your arms, looking straight ahead. As you exhale, dropping back down. Breathing in, bringing the arms up through the front of your body, over the head. As you exhale, bring the hands back down to your heart center. So again, bringing the arms back up. Exhaling, hands through the heart center. Breathing the hands down to the ground. Crown of the head reaches towards the earth. Breathing in, straightening the elbows, looking straight ahead. Exhale, dropping back down. Breathing in, bringing the arms back up over the head. And as you exhale, bring the hands back down to the heart center. So pausing here for just a moment. So take a moment for a standing meditation. So again, really grounding the feet, connecting them to the earth. Allowing the knees to be soft. Gently tucking the tailbone under as you lift up through the belly button. Gently tucking the chin in so the crown of the head is the highest part of the body. And then bringing the attention back to the breath. And then when you're ready, begin to lower yourself back to your seat. Thank you both for your comments. Namaste.
So we're just going to open up to a Q&A. And that means you get to ask questions. So we just had all of these amazing women share such a beautiful meditation with us on various topics. So I know part of the reason why I asked these, again, amazing women to come is to talk about lots of things related to the topic. I realized I didn't actually say the title of this panel discussion. So the title was, or is, Sitting Still, Standing Up, Women, Buddhism, and Social Justice. So you are welcome to ask whatever you like, and if you have a question for a panelist in particular, just do that, otherwise we'll go freestyle, whoever wants to answer. If you can say your name, and just keep it to a question, try to keep it somewhat brief since we want to be able to open it up to everybody, but besides that, no restrictions. So, anybody want to start?
Actually, can I make an invitation?
Yes.
So the Buddhist and the close to Buddhist community seems to take a stance of like starting out with a kind of politeness. Prohibit people from asking questions, and so you should know that all of the people here are really truly open to your questions. Be considerate, but you don't need to be polite. You don't have to keep things and sort of find really special words to ask what you need. This is so just respectful is awesome, always welcome. But other than that, please say what you mean from your heart.
So hello, my name is Anurag. Very grateful for this panel. I am wondering if you all can briefly share your stories and how you found Buddhism. And Booker touched on it a little bit, but I'd love for me and others to hear about your journey to Buddhism as it relates to social justice and your gender identity as well, if that's applicable. Thank you.
I think I got first exposed to Buddhism when my brother joined what's commonly known as the Hare Krishnas, the International Society for Krishna Consciousness, when I was about 14. And so I would go with him to meetings and satsangs and things. And then through that, found my way into some dharma books that I did not understand. But when I got to college, I started taking religious studies courses and ended up majoring in religious studies and focusing on early Buddhism, actually. And I was minoring in women's studies because they did not have a major at the time. I wanted to do a double major. So my focus was women in early Buddhism. And really, at that time, there was no interwebs. And so I was relying on the research of some pioneering scholars, particularly Rita Gross, and really absorbing a lot of what she had discovered and wrote about. So that was my kind of introduction to women in Buddhism. At the same time, I was doing a lot of courses in the summer at Howard, where my dad taught, and really focused on Black Power movement and women's role in that. So it was sort of like this parallel interest of mine that was informing a lot of my world understanding. So it was sort of race and dharma and gender, and in those three threads, along with a lot of other explorations, have been kind of following me since.
So for me, I've always been interested in spirituality and the inner life. And when I was in my late teens, my mom brought me to a psychic teacher who I studied with for quite a while. And I used to have private interviews with her once a week. And in one of those interviews, years into being her student, she looks at me and said, Buddhism. This was 1968. And so I went, okay. And I went to Weiser's bookstore. This was right around the corner. Which is, I think, the only spiritual bookstore other than the Quest bookstore in the 50s. And I just bought all the books on their shelf. But of course, in those days, the shelf was this one. And they were all, like Seven was saying, they were all, she was saying she didn't understand them, neither did I, because they were all in Victorian language, and Alexander Neil and John Blofeld, and all of these really amazing scholars who'd gone to Tibet in the turn of the 20th century. And they came back and put all of the Tibetan texts into highly Christian language. And that's what I started out. And I knew that it was momentous, and I knew that it meant something, but I wasn't quite sure what it meant. And then, so I went back to my teacher, and I said, well, they're all talking about meditation, and how do you meditate? And she said, you just sit. And I said, you just what? And she said, you just sit. And I said, oh, okay. So every morning I'd get up, and before I left my bed, I would just sit. And I did that for, I don't know how many years, for 20 years, I think. Every morning for half an hour, I just sat. And I finally, in the late 80s, met my teacher, Jack Cornfield, because I had read his book, and a friend of mine who used to go on silent retreats said he was going on a silent retreat, and I used to laugh at him because it sounded like camp. And he said, I'm off to retreat, and I said, oh, great, we'll go to camp. And he said, yeah, this guy, Jack Cornfield. And I said, who? And he said, this guy, Jack Cornfield, do you know him? And I said, I've read his book. And I said, he's teaching? And he said, yes. And I said, okay, I'll go. And that was the beginning of my association with Theravada practice. And the rest is history.
Tell this story, sort of. Well, it's funny, I can imagine this is probably the question people ask me most, and I always wonder about the answer. Because, you have different layers. You think you discovered, kind of came upon something, it's like, no, actually, that was for that. So I've come to realize, which I hadn't really thought about much in Emmer's sharings before, is that I went to, so one of the questions was about gender identification. I want to respond to that because the question of being in women in Buddhism is always an interesting tension for me, because I feel like I identify as she and her, and but also that I mainly inhabit mostly masculine energy, and so I have an interesting tension. I always feel like I'm crashing the party. Oh, like I did. And then I think about how I'm sitting. That's probably why this all happened, because I had to learn to sit just really still instead of sitting my legs open. I got to things that had a lot of women in it. I was like, oh, we shouldn't sit that way. So that, that's an interesting tension, I think, in terms of the conversation, because that's a part of the way that we begin to divide ourselves in some ways, right? There's certain things that one should be thinking about, or they're women thoughts. And that's not actually true when your gender relationship is fluid. Even like what you think about is important. I was having a conversation actually with Heather about never actually experiencing a sense of lack of security or safety on the basis of being female-bodied. And so it took me a long time to realize that wasn't true for everyone. I went to school, though, in my circumstances ended me up in junior high school in Chinatown. And it's only really recently that I realized that that had a significant influence on my path to Buddhism. I just hadn't really thought about it before, but I was immersed really in a culture that was where Buddhist images and sensibilities were just embedded into the culture. People were saying Buddhist things because it was not convert Buddhism, it was just one's life. What you did, and there were certain little rituals that I participated in as being a part of the community, being connected with people. But more sort of like Western-minded consciously, the way that I think of it is a bookstore nearby. I was in Tower Books, that existed today. And I stumbled across this book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And differently, I actually totally got it. Well, I got it, then I realized like no one else got it. And I got it like I have a life that was sort of like, before Buddhism and after Buddhism, everything else faded to the background. I barely remember my life, right? Sort of like this thing it just is, when you take pictures and there's something that's sharp and in focus. And so the rest of my life sort of dropped back. Whatever I thought I was doing, whatever I thought I was about, sort of dropped into the background after reading that book and because it felt like it explained me, right? The ways in which I couldn't make sense of myself in relationship to everything and everyone around me was captured in the words in that book for me. My grandfather had passed, and I was in a very significant time of grieving as well. And so the philosophical aspect of it became realized in the sitting with the grief, sitting with the vulnerability and uncertainty that his death brought for me.
Mm-hmm.